Hi everyone, welcome to another Business Book Club blog. That's easy for me to say. And this time out, I'm reading Joy at Work by Marie Kondo. Having seen her television program on Netflix, I've been a long time been a believer that Marie Kondo is as much a life consultant as she is a tidying consultant. I feel that when she's asking people to hold on to things or discard them, that really she's asking people to evaluate their values. Love the way that she does this and help people find purpose and joy in their lives, and I was really keen to see how she does this in the workplace too. In the book, she helps us tidy our physical workspace, but she also talks about how to tidy the less tangible aspects of our working life, such as tidying your time, tidying your decisions, tidying your teams, even. I was interested to see whether this idea would actually work when applied to your day to day working life. One of the things I particularly like about this book is she puts forward this idea that we should have joy at work. Now, some people might debate whether or not we should really look to the workplace as a source of joy, and Marie Kondo starts the book by making a compelling case to suggest that we should. Is it as simple as that though? Well, that's what I was looking at, and with you here, I'm going to share with you what I learned from following the methods in the book. First part of the book covers off the idea of why you should tidy, and Mary makes a really compelling case for tidying. She cites various studies which have shown that when we tidy, we work much more productively and efficiently. And of course, she describes the benefits of getting away from the thousands of unopened emails. She points out the amount of time is lost looking for things or procrastinating, shuffling things around on your desk, and talks about how having a cluttered, inspiring workspace, it makes us much more motivated at work than, of course, when we're working in a untidy environment. Sorry. In the book, she gives some really good examples as well of why it's good to tidy some of the less tangible things. So she gives examples of people who thought they had gone into their dream job or taken the dream promotion. They have, sorted out and tidied their time, their meetings, their tasks, only to discover that their dream job or promotion was actually, not what they thought. They've been spending all day on tasks or in meetings that weren't what they signed up for at all. And she describes how those people have gone on to either create space for the things that spark joy or to leave and pursue a different career entirely. So I'm already sold. I'm a big believer that a tidy space is a tidy mind. And of course, who doesn't want to work in a nicer environment? She also puts forward here that this process is not about getting rid of things. So she says very clearly that deciding what to get rid of is not the same as choosing what sparks joy. And her suggestion in the book is that you visualize your ideal working life. You visualize your ideal career, what you really want from your job, and that you focus on that as opposed to trying to get away from the negatives. So she asks you to visualize the physical environment, but also the behaviors, the things you'd like to be doing, and of course the feeling you want to get from your workspace. Throughout the book, there are three key questions that keep popping up. And of course, Mary's process of piling things up. So if you've seen the TV program, she gets people, for example, to get all their clothes that they have in the house, pile them on the bed, and then sort through them. This process comes up quite a lot throughout the book, even with things like time and decisions. And each time we're asking the same three questions, which is, does it spark joy? Do I need it? Does it actually help me do my job? And will it bring me future joy? So is it going to help me in my career in the future? And if the answer to those three things is no, then it's probably something that you maybe shouldn't be hanging on to. And so you can focus your time and your energy on the things you really want. So let's start with the physical workspace. In this section of the book, Mary breaks it down into different categories. First of all, she starts with books. She says she starts with this because this is a nice, easy, straightforward one for people most of the time. I have to say, I have a bookcase full of books with books stacked on top of books. So this was a really good place for me to start to gain some more valuable space. Again, she uses this pile up method. So get all your books out, pile them all up into one place so you can really take stock of what you've got. Then ask yourself those three questions. Does it spark joy? Do I need it for my work? Or will this spark joy for me in future? So will reading this book or hanging on to this book help me for my future goals in some way? She says if you haven't read a book yet, but you're convinced that you will, and it fits the criteria of those three questions, she suggests you set a deadline for reading it because you're much more likely to get value for the book. With regards to things like papers, she said the general rule is just to discard all the papers as a rule. I think this is a really good idea. If there's any papers that you do need, so let's say you ask those 3 questions and there is something you need for work, then she suggests that maybe you take a photo of it or scan it and then tag it in a digital filing system somewhere so you always have it, but you don't have to keep the physical papers. If you do want to hang on to the papers, she suggests that you categorise the paperwork so you always know where to find it when you need it, that you store it upright so that you can see it, and that you have a pending box on your desk for papers that you're actively working on at any given time, but this can also be tidied away. She also talks about kimono, or these are kind of miscellaneous items, so things like office supplies. So do we really need 5 pads of post-its? Again, she suggests categorising and storing these in the same place, because if I see that I've got 5 packs of post-it notes, I'm unlikely to hoard more. The same goes things for like paper, staplers, but she also talks about things like electrical items. So most people have a series of electrical cords and chargers for phones or devices that they don't even own anymore. Can you get rid of those? Of course, there are a few items that we need for our job. There's not a lot you can do about those, but can you get them down to a minimum? And of course, it can be good to get together and pile up all of your, personal care things like hand sanitizers, lip balms, but also things like food and drink as well. I remember working in a large office where I had about 5 different types of tea bag in my desk. Not really what that space is for. So again, ask your questions and can you sort through these? And then she also talks about things like business cards. Do you really need to keep them all? Are you even going to refer back to them again? She suggests that actually you sort through your business cards, again, pile them up and ask which ones spark joy. And actually these days, most of the time, you can either photograph or actually scan in many apps business cards and record the information that way. And given that most people use LinkedIn these days, it's probably not necessary to keep a Rolodex of business cards. Finally, she talks about sentimental items, so things like photos, and again she encourages you to ask, do they spark joy? So that quirky paperweight a friend got you from holiday may have sparked joy at one point. Does it spark joy anymore? If it doesn't, is it time to hold on to it and, using the KonMari method, thank it for what it's given you before letting go of it? Or if it really is sentimental and important to you, then of course there's nothing wrong with keeping it on your desk if it does spark joy. The general rule for your physical space is to categorise things so you don't accumulate clutter, store them upright, and her general rule of thumb is that you don't keep anything on your desk, you keep a pretty blank workspace. The point she makes is that your desk is a workspace, not a storage space. Therefore, the less things you can have on your desk, the better. Of course, if you prefer to have your pens and pencils lined up on your desk neatly rather than shoved in a drawer, then of course that's fine, it's entirely up to you, but it should be an inspirational and inspiring place to work every day. Let's move on to your digital space. So starting with your desktop on your computer, Mary says this should be very much like the desktop that you physically work on too. This should be free from clutter. So her suggestion is that on your desktop, you should only have one folder, and she suggests that's a folder for things that spark joy. All your other folders should be hidden away. She suggests something similar for your phone too. She suggests that you should delete any unnecessary apps or ones that you barely use. Remember, you can always download them again. And she says that your home screen on your phone, like your desktop, both physical and digital, should be free from clutter too. So this should be a fairly blank space with only the core apps on, whatever they are for you, to help you avoid digital distractions. So she suggests tucking your other apps into separate folders too, so much more minimalist. So just keep them into folders such as business, personal, or things that spark joy for you. The key theme here seems to be that she suggests that you should use the search function on your phone or computer to find things within folders. So keep your folders down to a minimum and use the search function to pick out anything specific. This is a tip she also gave for email as well. So she says you should have in your emails, you should ask your 3 questions. So does this email spark joy? Do I actually need this information anymore? Or will holding on to this information help me for future? But other than that, she suggests you should put all of your emails that you're hanging on to and put them into just one folder and use the search function to find the emails back out again. Now, I did follow this advice to a point. I have completely cleared out both my personal and business email. My desktop was very uncluttered anyway, but I have kept a few of my folders. Personally, I found that the search function isn't as sophisticated as maybe you would like it to be, but I do take the point. It is possible to rely on that search function a bit more and maybe have less folders in my desktop and in my email. And finally, we apply the KonMari method to the less tangible parts of our working lives, such as our time, our decisions, and our meetings, so on and so forth. For this aspect of the book is written, I believe, by Scott Sonenshein, the author of Stretch, and he has worked with Mary to produce these bits and produce this advice. So now we start to apply this method to things that are a little bit more abstract. So the first one is time. Now, Mary starts this section by describing 3 traps we fall into that cause us to be untidy with our time. The first one is the over-earning trap, the idea that we work harder to buy more stuff, we acquire more stuff, therefore we need more money to keep up with it all, and therefore we keep over-earning and not making the most of our time in accordance with our vision that I was referring to earlier. She also talks about falling into the trap of urgency, thinking that everything is urgent and needs doing now, which of course is not always the case. And finally, she mentions something that I've talked about in previous blogs, which is multitasking, and the fact that we're not more efficient when we multitask, we actually are slower and less productive. So her suggestions for tidying your time is, again, to use that pile-up method. So to put your different tasks that you have to do in any working day, list them all down and put each one on a separate index card or post-it note. Then she suggests you take this pile of post-it notes or index cards and use this to find out what your job actually is. So she describes people who have signed up for a job thinking it's one thing, only to find that they spend most of their day doing other things that are not that core activity. In fact, Mary suggests to us that over half of most people's days is not spent doing the core activities of their actual job. So once you put your pile together, she suggests explore whether this does fit your job. And she says divide them into 3 areas really, which should either be core tasks or your business as usual activity, your projects, so the long-term or temporary stuff, and then finally development tasks for the future. Again, we should ask our 3 questions. Does the task spark joy? Do I absolutely need to do it? And finally, will it help me reach my future vision or spark joy in the future? And then decide what to keep and which tasks you really need to let go of. What I really like here is that she suggests that you should also try and add joy to your working day as well. So if you've managed to clear out the clutter, find time to add a little joy. And I think that's a great piece of advice. I personally prefer to use the Eisenhower matrix or Stephen Covey's 4Ds, but this is a very, very similar process. And I really like the idea of getting the index cards or the post-its that makes it more visual. Mary's idea of getting everything in one place just to see the enormity and the impact of it all before sorting through works really well here and adds something to that for me. One of my favourite parts of the book is where we apply this tidying up methodology to decisions. Now, tidying decisions is not something I've really thought about before, but this one really resonated with me. Again, the suggestion is that you write all your decisions down on separate index cards or post-it notes, pile them all up together so you can see all the decisions that you have to take in any day, week or month, for example, and then you sort through your decision pile. The suggestion here is that you divide your decisions into 3 categories: low, medium and high. Now your low value decisions, if you like, the idea is here you should not spend too much time on these. They're not worthy of your attention. So good enough or just enough is good enough for these decisions. So for example, does it really matter which font you use in the PowerPoint presentation if you don't work in marketing, for example? Does it matter which brand of copy of paper you're going to be using day in, day out? Some of these decisions are very, very low value. Either just make them once and stick to the same brand, a bit like Steve Jobs and his black polo necks, or could you automate the decision or just go with the default setting and stick with it? I really like this idea. It's true, low value decisions shouldn't take up a lot of our time. So that's good advice. Then, of course, you've got the high stakes decisions, and of course, that is where you want to be spending most of your time. These are important decisions and normally one that further our careers. So, of course, these are the ones you should hold on to. And then, of course, you've got your medium importance decisions. Now, this is where you've got to do your real sorting work. And again, ask yourself those three questions. Does making this decision really work for me? Is it going to help me in the future if I make it? Other questions that are in there as well are things like, is there anyone else that's affected by the decision more? Is someone else in a better place to make the decision? Is someone have better expertise than me when it comes to that decision? Could you entrust that decision to someone else? Could it be a development opportunity for somebody? And how often does this decision need to be made? Could it be automated? So 3 tips there on making decisions. It's a very interesting exercise and one that I thought was really, really valuable. How tidy is your network? In this bit of the book, Mary suggests that you should have a look at your network and ask yourself the question, how big of a network do you really need? A lot of the focus on networks is making them as big as possible. Mary's suggestion was to sort through all the people that you know, so either in your contact list, on your LinkedIn, or on your social media pages, and then ask yourself, do these relationships spark joy? That seems quite an odd thing to do with relationships regarding people, but the suggestion here is that it's about the depth and the quality of the relationship as opposed to the size of the LinkedIn connections. So for example, she says that she thinks it could be disingenuous to link in with somebody or connect with somebody if you really have no intention of speaking to them again, and points out that sometimes it's the deeper, more in-depth relationships that actually have the most value both for you and for other people. So her suggestion is to perhaps keep a smaller network but have one that is far more meaningful and valuable to all parties. She has some good tips here too. She says when you're talking about networking, be present, always help others, so consider how you can help other people do their best work. And her other suggestion for networking is to be open and to be trusting, and suggests actually being a little bit vulnerable with the people you connect with, perhaps trusting them with your problems and not being afraid to be a bit silly or bring a bit of fun into your network, which I think is great advice. So I really, really like this idea of having fewer connections and focusing on just deepening the relationship with each one, and having one that's based on mutual trust, respect, support, and vulnerability and sharing. And I have to say that resonates with my own experience of using a network. Now, who here wouldn't benefit from tidying their meetings? Tidying my meetings is not something I've thought of before, but I love the idea of it. Most people have a series of meetings that they have to attend, and most people hate turning up to ones that are not or of any value, or that just really badly run. Again, Mary suggests that you should visualize your ideal meeting. So what would that look like? What would you be doing? What role would you play? How would you participate? What would the purpose of that meeting be? And she encourages people to think about this before going to meetings. Again, she also suggests the pile-up method. So get a list of all your meetings, pile them all together, and then to sort through using your questions. So does this meeting spark joy? Do I absolutely have to attend it, or will attending this meeting help me in future? What I really like about this section of the book is that she has some other tips too, and the big one for me is that she says that anyone can bring joy to a meeting. And what I love about this section, and it's a theme that's in other parts of the book too, it's about what you bring. So not just finding joy in your work, but bringing joy to your work too. And she suggests 6 rules for bringing joy to a meeting, and I'm going to share those with you now. The first one is to show up and be really present in the meeting. So not writing your shopping list, not thinking of something else, but being fully present with your colleagues. She says you should also come prepared to a meeting, so that's the second one. So read the papers beforehand and make sure you know why you're in the meeting and what role you're supposed to play. She also asks that you put away your electronics, and of course we've all been in a meeting when someone's tapping away on a mobile or a laptop doing non-work activity. She advises that you not be that person. She also says to listen. I mean, really listen, making sure you're paying full attention, actively listening in the meeting. And she also suggests that you should speak up, that you have a unique voice and a perspective, and quite often it's wholly appropriate for you to add your contribution to the meeting. And finally, she says, do no harm. So we've all been guilty of talking over, blaming, not listening to other people. She suggests subtle changes such as saying yes and rather than no but, and giving respect to everyone in the meeting is sure to bring joy to it. So I love this idea of not just tidying your meetings and think about the ones that you're not going to attend, but how can you bring joy to the ones you do attend. She also gives us some top tips for chairing your meetings, the ones that you run. So of course, not only should we be good attendees, we should also lead the way by being good chairs also. A final area of tidying up at work that didn't really resonate with me so much was the idea of tidying up your teams. Now again, the advice here is to visualise your ideal team. So what does a good team look like to you? How will people behave? How will they interact? What role will you play? But she also applies this kind of pile-up method. So write all the teams that you're a part of, so your day-to-day team that you're in, but also the various project teams that you're asked to sit in and be a part of. And then again, she asks you to write a sentence to identify the purpose of each team and see if you can write a sentence crystallising very clearly what the purpose of that team is, so you're really clear on why you're in it. Again, she also asks you to sort through this pile using the 3 questions. I think the challenge for this for me is, one, I'm self-employed, so perhaps this doesn't apply to me so much, but I'm not really sure that if this is an area where this method of piling up and sorting through those 3 questions really works. If you are employed by someone else, regardless of whether or not a team brings you joy, you're probably going to have to work in it. So I'm not really sure if this works here. However, she does also share some tips for how to be a good team player and how to have a tidy, well-run team, and those are worth reading. So some value there, but for me, this is an area where the method doesn't really work. So what did I think of the book? I really enjoyed reading the book. Not only were the tips in it practical and useful, but it was an enjoyable read too. I have actually applied the tips for tidying my digital and physical workspace, and I have to say that I've been really pleased with the results. And not only did I have a tidier space, it has also encouraged me to keep a tidy space. So 1 month later, my desk is still tidy and my digital workspace is still tidy too. Having tidied them, I'm really, really keen to keep them in good shape, and I've maintained those habits so far. So I think there's plenty of valuable things we can take away from the book. For some people, they may find some of these tips a little bit hard to implement. If you're employed, I don't think your manager will thank you for deciding that you've tidied some meetings, or that you've decided that some tasks or decisions are not really yours. I think if you're employed, I don't think your manager or your company are really going to thank you for that, so it might be a little hard to implement. And of course, if you're self-employed, your clients may not thank you for ditching some client meetings either. That said though, just because you can't implement all of it doesn't mean you shouldn't implement some of it. And I think it's definitely worthwhile reading the book and taking the time to tidy your space, both physical and digital. More than anything else, I really liked the positivity in the book and this idea of sparking joy at work. Mary suggests that not only do we find purpose and meaning in our work, that we can all bring joy to it. And this is something that I agree with her wholeheartedly. We spend over half our waking lives at work when we're adults, and I think we should enjoy it and add real purpose to it. Sometimes we're so busy we don't remember to do that, but having read the book, for me it's made a really compelling case for creating a space that's inspirational, productive, and more importantly, gives you joy at work.